America is in a George Floyd moment, not about policing, but about crime. That video, remember, 5 years ago of Floyd's death, it changed how we talked about policing. This video has every reason to change the way we talk about crime. Many of you probably haven't seen the video until now. The same legacy media outlets that did wall-to-wall coverage of Floyd have largely ignored this story. And when they finally did talk about it this morning, it was to call anybody who cared or was concerned about this story a racist.
I have to say, some of the replies to Musk, some of the comments around this story are baldly racist, stoking fear of African Americans because this man attacked a white woman.
So unarmed, innocent woman is killed on a train, and the real problem is racism. That worked 5 years ago. It does not work anymore. This story is as much about race as the George Floyd story was and is. Race is center to this story. George Floyd, the story was about how police treated Black Americans. The Iryna Zarutska story is about the epidemic of Black crime in America. More specifically, it is about how a host of progressive policies keep letting the worst offenders back on the street until they commit crimes like this.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. So we have an update in the Iryna Zarutska story, a very disappointing update. And I'm noticing it's a pattern that is happening in our legal system where the most horrific the crime, the more likely it is that the perpetrator will get off on some sort of insanity plea where they will basically be deemed unfit to stand trial. We've seen examples of that. Or they get classed as, mentally insane. So they get put in a mental institution rather than a prison, if that. And they completely avoid the death penalty. The Carlos Brown Jr. was evaluated December 29 at Central Regional Hospital, and the subsequent report determined he was not competent to stand trial. His attorney has asked the court to delay his competency hearing by 180 days. The results were previously sealed in state court and were only revealed as the motion was filed. So the prosecutors did not object to the 180-day delay of Brown's Rule 24 hearing, which was previously scheduled for April 30, which will determine whether he is fit to proceed with a potential death penalty trial. Brown is also facing federal charges and will remain in custody on that case. So a judge must now determine whether to accept the report's findings, and the case against him will likely be delayed until his capacity is determined to be restored by the court. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean that he's out walking the streets. He's still locked up. But as of now, he's not going to face trial to be found guilty of murder, to be held accountable, to have on paper that he is guilty of the brutal killing, the brutal murder of Iryna Zarutska. Her family are going to remain in limbo while somebody determines whether or not he is capable of facing trial. And we have seen examples of defendants completely avoiding trial because they are deemed to lack the capacity to stand trial. And I do think in some cases we do have defendants who know how to play the system. The fact that that guy was on the train in the first place when he should have been locked up, somebody who was arrested multiple times, I think it was like 14 times, was still out on the streets. If the legal system was doing its job to begin with, he wouldn't have been on that train and been in a position to attack an innocent woman who was minding her own business in a completely unprovoked attack. He slashed her throat without a second thought and then walked through the train bragging about getting the white woman, something to that effect. He had the capacity to do that though, didn't he?
The Carlos Brown was found incapable to proceed after a court-ordered evaluation was done at Central Regional Hospital in Butner, North Carolina. Brown is charged with the murder of Iryna Zarutska on the light rail in August of 2025. Brown faces both state and federal murder charges.
If the hospital finds that you can't understand the proceedings, so you have no idea what's going on, and you can't assist your lawyer in providing for your defense, then what they rule is that you are incapable to proceed.
Because Brown is currently in federal custody, state proceedings are now on hold. His defense team filed a motion to delay his Rule 24 hearing for 180 days, since any efforts to restore his capacity can't happen until he is back in state custody. Attorney Tim Kennedy, not involved in the case, says this does not mean Brown walks away free.
We're not going to keep him in the Department of Adult Corrections or the prisons here in North Carolina. We're going to put him in the mental health system, and hopefully over a period of time, he does get better. But if not, then it's very possible that he spends the rest of his life in these mental health facilities and is never free to leave them.
For Iryna Zarutska's family, the wait continues. Their attorney, Lauren Newton, says they know the process takes time, but they are focused on seeing it through the right way.
We have to let the justice system play out. The wheels of justice, unfortunately, move slow, but the family wants to make sure this is done right, and so do our state and federal prosecutors.
So under North Carolina law, a defendant is deemed capable to proceed trial if they can understand the nature and object of the proceedings, comprehend his or her situation in reference to the proceedings, and assist in his or her defense in a rational or reasonable manner. Now again, this person had been arrested multiple times. Why did they not set him aside and determine his mental stability before letting him back out on the streets? He had 14 prior arrests, and at no point, you mean to tell me nobody fought to determine whether he was mentally insane and able to walk our streets and not be a threat to anybody? In all of those 14 arrests, every single time they deemed him capable of being out on the streets among all of us. Every single time. But now that he has actually gone ahead and taken somebody's life in the most brutal way imaginable, now you want to worry about his mental capacity. If his mental health was such an issue to the point where he lacks capacity, he's incapable of standing trial, why was he deemed okay to be put out on the streets 14 times? Now they want to lock him up in a mental institution. And the fact is, if there wasn't a pattern of this catch and release, letting violent criminals out on the street over and over again, if there wasn't this pattern where we see judges seem to have more sympathy for the criminal than the victims, that criminal still seems to be the priority. Judges who think it's racist to lock up criminals, they think they're locking up the disenfranchised and the people who just need to be rehabilitated. They just need a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, 13th, 14th chance. If we didn't see this pattern, then maybe we would have more trust in the system that it's doing the right thing. So of course, people in the very least are going to be very skeptical about this decision, because he certainly had the capacity to target this woman who was minding her own business, to brag about getting the white woman. He had the capacity to do that. He wasn't just lashing out indiscriminately because he can't control himself. He targeted Iryna on the train that night.
Brown Jr.'s lawyers requested a 180-day delay for his competency hearing. The judge formally agrees he's incompetent. North Carolina law mandates that state charges must be dismissed.
Now, despite the state ruling, Brown still remains in federal custody. A grand jury in October 2025 indicted Brown Jr. for violence against a railroad carrier and mass transportation system causing death.
Many conservatives are outraged over Brown Jr. being found incompetent to stand trial. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller wrote in X, "The purpose of a system is what it does." And political commentator Matt Walsh wrote in part, "If you're too incompetent to understand that you shouldn't butcher an innocent woman on the train, then you should die. Period. Arrest, convict, execute. You are not fit to be part of human society." This is going to outrage a lot of people, obviously.
Yes, it is. I mean, some version of people being found mentally insane or incapable of conducting their own defense or the insanity defense. I mean, this is not a new concept. Like, this has been around for a very, very
that's
long
fine.
time.
But then he has to be locked up in I don't care, locked up in what? In a mental insane asylum, fine. But this person who had 14 prior arrests, numerous violent interactions, in and out of facilities, released, that can't happen anymore. Like, it's enough times. I'm not fine if he's truly psychotically insane and can't be, well, then he needs to be, but he just can't be on the street. Well, harm people. That we have to all agree to. And
sure.
And again, this is frankly a little similar to what we were saying about Kanye yesterday. Like, this is someone who was taking antipsychotic medication and then stopped taking antipsychotic medication. So if you're saying he's not responsible in the moment where he killed that woman horrifically, violently, because he's insane, well, again, I'm not in charge of my actions when I'm drunk behind the wheel of a car, but I did put myself in that circumstance. It is, in my view, it should be on you to responsibly take your medicine or commit yourself to a facility. His mother tried to have him involuntarily committed and couldn't get the state to say yes to that.
So during a welfare check last January, Brown asked cops to investigate a man-made material inside his body that was controlling his actions, according to an affidavit obtained by the Charlotte Observer. Rita said, targets a woman because of her skin color. He said after stabbing her, I got that white girl, and then flees the crime scene. Sounds like he's competent enough to be held accountable for his actions. So we need to keep this story alive. We need to make sure that we're monitoring what's going on with this situation. And we never forget Iryna Zarutska and what she went through, what she was put through, something that was preventable.
We want to tell you about Iryna. She escaped war-torn Ukraine and was setting up a better life for herself in America, in Charlotte. Her obituary describes her as, quote, a gifted and passionate artist who had a deep love for animals, adding that she was happiest when surrounded by family and loved ones. Reportedly, she had a Black Lives Matter poster in her house. Think about that. She escaped war only to get murdered here in America. The irony. Somehow all those folks who talk about Ukraine all the time aren't talking about her now. Coverage, or the lack of coverage on most of the major networks, shows the obvious bias and blindness by most media organizations to what Americans are actually scared about. If you're scared about something, you care about it. So in fact, the mayor of Charlotte praised media outlets for not showing the video. Of course, she doesn't want you to see the video, nor does she want you to see his criminal record. He had 33 run-ins with the law dating back to 2007, 14 arrests, 4 of them for felonies. He recently served 5 years in prison for armed robbery, but was let out early. Shortly after his release, he assaulted his own sister. He was let out after that. But the mayor's statement didn't talk about that. She talked about needing compassion for the alleged killer since he was homeless and had mental illnesses. Anybody who stabs a woman in the throat probably has mental illnesses. But that's the point. For progressives and their friends in the media, they think that crime isn't the criminal's fault. Crime is somehow the fault of a racist country.
And that's the issue. This can be another example of them refusing to accept that the criminal is the one responsible for his crime, that the criminal is the one who is at fault and needs to be held accountable. Yes, this man was homeless, but there are plenty of homeless people. There are people who have mental health conditions who don't go around slashing people's throats. Because despite those challenges, they still know that it's wrong to do that. This guy was deemed mentally capable or mentally fit to be let back out onto the streets after assaulting his sister, physically assaulting his sister after committing armed robbery. But yet now that it's time for accountability, because in this situation, there is no letting him back out onto the streets after what he did. Even the progressives, the progressive judges can't spin this and just dismiss it as, oh, oops. Not in this situation. So now they're leaning back on him being mentally ill and therefore not responsible for his own actions. And as disturbing as it is, The video is there for everybody to see. I believe he knew what he was doing. Or if he didn't know what he was doing, why on earth was that not caught much earlier so that this crime could have been prevented? And that is the biggest crime of all. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video. And a huge thank you to all of those who have hyped my videos. It is much appreciated.